Orania.
Orania.
Why is everyone so obsessed with Orania?
People are curious about the unknown, and Orania is one of those unknowns.
There's a place tucked deep within the vast heart of South Africa, a place that to some feels like a relic of a bygone era, and to others a quiet dream of cultural preservation. Its name is Orania. The town sits along the banks of the Orange River, surrounded by the semi-arid landscape of the northern Cape Province. This isolated location is no accident. It's a deliberate choice made by its founders. Nearly 1,000 kilometers from Cape Town and 600 from Johannesburg, Orania exists in a geographical bubble that mirrors its social isolation. At first glance, Orania looks like any small, peaceful town. Tree-lined streets, modest homes, families walking freely under the sun. Children play in parks without supervision. They speak of safety, order, and values. Children ride bicycles at dusk without fear. Doors remain unlocked. There are no burglar bars, no crime. It feels like a utopia, if you belong. Johannes, a middle-aged farmer. We work with our hands here. Everyone works, from the doctor to the street sweeper. There's no job too small for an Afrikaner. This principle is enshrined in the town's unusual labor policy. There are no black domestic workers or gardeners, positions traditionally held by black South Africans throughout the country. Instead, white residents perform all labor themselves. Young Afrikaners serve tables at restaurants, clean hotel rooms, and collect garbage. The town boasts its own schools, retirement home, cultural center, and community radio station. The Koeksister Monument, a statue honoring the traditional Afrikaner pastry, stands as a symbol of cultural pride. Holidays like Geloftedag, Day of the Vow, commemorate Afrikaner history, recalling the 1838 Battle of Blood River where Voortrekkers defeated Zulu warriors. Orania even runs its own green school, an environmentally conscious institution using sustainable building materials and solar power. Students learn traditional crafts alongside modern subjects. Conservation and self-sufficiency are emphasized, reflecting the town's focus on independence. But belonging is the very heart of the problem. In a country where black South Africans still own only a fraction of the land, despite making up the vast majority of the population, the legacy of dispossession is everywhere. The 1913 Natives Land Act restricted black land ownership to designated reserves comprising just 7% of the country's territory. This legislation, along with subsequent apartheid policies, created a profound imbalance that persists today. White South Africans, just 8% of the population, control over a third of privately owned land. Farms spanning thousands of hectares remain in the hands of families who acquired them generations ago, often through systems that explicitly excluded black ownership. And though generations have passed since the first European ships docked at the Cape of Good Hope, the question still lingers: who owns this land? Who gets to decide? This area was empty when we came, insists Anna, an elderly Orania resident whose family has lived in the town since the late 1990s. We built everything you see. We didn't take it from anyone. Historically, the region was inhabited by the Khoisan peoples before colonial expansion. Later, it fell within the disputed territories contested by Griqua, Tswana, and other indigenous groups. The emptiness described by settlers often obscured complex patterns of seasonal migration and land use by indigenous inhabitants. Today, as you drive through the northern Cape Province surrounding Orania, you see vast stretches of farmland interspersed with impoverished townships where predominantly black and colored South Africans live. The contrast is stark, a physical manifestation of the country's unresolved inequalities. Orania's defenders ask, why is it okay to celebrate Zulu culture, to honor Shaka Zulu, a fierce leader with a complex legacy, but not the Afrikaner heritage? Isn't all history stained with blood? Isn't all memory selective? Mariachi, we have a right to exist, says Mariachi, who runs a small craft shop selling handmade Afrikaner artifacts. We're not hurting anyone. We just want to preserve our language, our traditions, our way of life. She points to the decline of Afrikaans in universities, government, and public life. Once one of South Africa's official languages, its prominence has diminished in the post-apartheid era, partly due to its association with the oppressive regime. If we don't protect it, who will, she asks. But the pain of apartheid is not ancient. It is recent, living, raw. Many South Africans who experienced forced removals, who carried passbooks, who were denied basic rights, they still live. They remember. And Orania's refusal to acknowledge that fully, to confront the system from which it benefited, is what fuels the outrage. They're living in a bubble of privilege, argues Thabo, an activist from Kimberley, the nearest major city. They claim it's about culture, but you cannot separate Afrikaner culture from its role in apartheid. You cannot cherry-pick history, and yet, the debate isn't as simple as good versus evil. Many Iranians speak of wanting nothing from the government, no aid, no assistance, only recognition of their right to live according to their values, to teach their children in their language, to build a society as they see fit. They even created their own currency, the Ora. Colorful notes featuring Afrikaner historical figures and local landmarks circulate within the town's boundaries. It's not legal tender elsewhere, but within Orania, it strengthens the local economy and symbolizes independence. The town generates its own electricity through solar panels that dot the landscape. Water comes from the Orange River, treated in their own facilities. They've built their own institutions, even their own civil service. In a way, Orania functions like a micronation within a nation, not officially sovereign but undeniably distinct. Economic self-sufficiency drives much of daily life. Pecan nut farming has become a major industry, with orchards stretching along the riverbanks. Small manufacturing enterprises produce furniture, clothing, and food products. Tourism, mostly from curious South Africans and international visitors, contributes to the local economy through the town's hotels, guest houses, and museum. Some see that independence as inspiring, others see it as dangerous. Outside its borders, South Africa struggles with inequality, corruption, and crime. The dream of the Rainbow Nation is beautiful, but the reality is hard. Millions are unemployed, many are hungry. Load shedding or planned electricity outages affects daily life. Water scarcity threatens many communities. The land reform debate is a ticking bomb. Nearly 3 decades after apartheid's end, the question of land redistribution remains contentious. When President Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law a bill that allows expropriation of land without compensation, fear erupted, especially among white landowners who worry that history may now be turned against them. "We're not against land reform," explains Dirk, a local businessman in Orania, "but we believe in property rights. Without them, there's no stability, no investment, no future." He gestures toward the town's neat commercial center. "Everything you see here was built with private investment, people who believed in our vision." But others argue the deeper issue is economic opportunity. Most South Africans don't want land just to own it. They want security, dignity, a future. Farming, after all, is hard work, and not everyone dreams of it. The problem is not land alone. It is inequality, a broken system, a promise unfulfilled. "Namsa, we need jobs, education, infrastructure," says Namsa, a teacher from a nearby township. Land is important symbolically, but what good is land without the means to use it? Without capital? Without support? Still, Orania remains, unchanging, defiant, a town built on the idea that if the world cannot offer you space, you carve one out for yourself. But that idea, in the context of South Africa, is not neutral. It carries the weight of history, the weight of memory, and the weight of those who were never given that choice. As I arrived in Orania, I didn't know what to expect. I had heard the stories, felt the tension. As a black South African, I carried the knowledge that this land was once my ancestors, and that they were enslaved, beaten, erased. And yet, here I was, walking through a town that felt untouched by all of it. Peaceful, ordered, suspended in time. The sun was setting over the Orange River as I stood on its banks. In the distance, Afrikaner children played cricket on a well-maintained field. An elderly couple walked hand in hand along the riverside path. A young man worked on a tractor nearby, singing softly in Afrikaans. It looked idyllic, and perhaps for those who live here, it is. But peace built on exclusion is not peace for all. Safety that comes from keeping others out is not true security. And heritage, if not reckoned with honestly, becomes myth. And yet, Orania forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about race, about culture, about what it means to belong. It holds a mirror to South Africa, a mirror many would rather turn away from. To outsiders, it might sound like fiction. A town of around 3,000 people, governed entirely by its own residents, powered by its own solar grid, circulating its own currency, the Ora, and united by a single defining identity: whiteness. Orania is a self-declared Afrikaner enclave, and while it sits within the borders of the modern South African state in spirit, in governance, and in daily life, it exists in a world of its own. But this story doesn't begin in Orania. It begins far away, in a different African village. A village said to be protected by ancestral spirits, warrior spirits who fought and bled during the centuries of colonization and slavery. Local lore tells of one spirit in particular, fierce, proud, vengeful. They say this spirit reacts violently to the presence of white people, interpreting it as a provocation, a resurgence of the past. If a white person enters, they say, they die. Whether myth or warning, the message was clear. This village was a space reclaimed by memory, where trauma had been spiritualized into protection. Orania was not a dusty, forgotten hamlet hiding behind ideology. It was organized, disciplined, strangely thriving. Its people were not militants but patriots, deeply rooted in a vision of cultural preservation, economic self-sufficiency, and independence from the post-apartheid South African state. They built their own roads, their own schools, their own airstrip. Every structure that stood, every business that thrived, every service delivered, it was all paid for, planned, and constructed by the townspeople themselves. Government subsidies? None. National support? Irrelevant. This is a town determined to exist on its own terms. What we have built here is not against anyone. It is for ourselves, for our children, for our future. Everything you see, our hands made it, our money paid for it, our vision guides it. And yet, walking through Orania as the only black man among thousands of white faces was, in my own words, surreal. Like waking up in a dreamscape where the rules of the world had been turned upside down. Here, in the same country that birthed Nelson Mandela and bore the scars of apartheid, was a town where the struggle wasn't for racial harmony, but for racial preservation. The Afrikaner identity, with its language, its history, and its mythos, was being meticulously curated. In Orania, freedom means something different. It isn't defined by democracy or diversity. Here, freedom means separation. The people of Orania see themselves as continuing the legacy of the republics of old, the Boer republics like the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Their ancestors had fought for sovereignty, and while their flags no longer fly, the dream lingers in places like this. Economic and cultural independence are the cornerstones of Orania's vision. The community strives to be self-sufficient, emphasizing local production and traditional values. This pursuit of autonomy is seen as a way to preserve their unique heritage and secure a future on their own terms. One of Orania's proudest accomplishments is its agricultural prowess. Farmers in this region have mastered a rare feat: 2 full harvests in a single year. Wheat in summer, maize in winter. Their fields, bathed in sun and sustained by hard labor, feed not just Orania but buyers beyond its borders. The land is owned privately, yet the sense of collective destiny hangs heavy in the air. And then, there is the solar farm, a shimmering testament to their desire for energy independence. Established in 2021, the farm already provides nearly half of Orania's electricity needs. It isn't just about keeping the lights on, it's about sending a message. If you're not energy independent, you're not free. But the most peculiar emblem of Orania's identity might be the ora, its own currency. Pegged 1-to-1 to the South African rand, it is accepted throughout the town but useless beyond its borders. That too is the point. The ora keeps the economy local. It discourages crime, keeps wealth circulating within the community, and serves as a cultural marker, much like a flag or an anthem. Orania even boasts its own financial institutions, its own manufacturing plants, its own ambulance services, health facilities, and when necessary, helicopter emergency evacuations. Nothing about this town operates by accident. Every detail is a product of intent, of design, of a future imagined and carved from the bones of a painful past. The question that lingers, though, is not about what Orania has built, but why. Is this town a noble effort of self-determination, or a calculated retreat from reconciliation? A utopia or a fortress? The residents proudly call themselves Oranians, not white South Africans, not even necessarily South Africans. They pay taxes, yes, they operate within the law, but they dream of something more, something separate, something pure. And yet, the very existence of Orania forces a reckoning with the unfinished business of South Africa. What does unity mean in a land where separation still breeds prosperity for some and exclusion for others? What happens when cultural pride edges into historical amnesia? You cannot understand Orania without understanding apartheid, and you cannot understand apartheid without understanding colonialism. These histories are not separate, they are woven together. The question is whether Orania represents a continuation or a rejection of that shared history. This journey from a haunted village guarded by ancestral rage to a town sculpted by historical withdrawal unveils 2 extremes of a wounded continent. Both places, in their own way, are trying to reclaim what was lost. One protects the memory of resistance, the other safeguards a vision of cultural survival. Orania is a self-governed municipality in a nation where local control is often subject to party politics. But in Orania, there are no political parties. None. Elected officials are nominated by the community and serve without pay. Their currency is commitment, their reward is progress. This town was born from an agreement struck in 2000 with the South African government, a unique legal recognition that allowed Orania to function with a level of municipal autonomy unseen elsewhere in the country. Local bylaws, local taxes, local governance. The money earned here is invested here. The work is done by those who live here. They call it the principle of own labor. No outside workforce, no outsourcing. Everything is built, maintained, and lived in, by the community, for the community. And at the heart of this town's iconography is the little giant, a child rolling up his sleeves. He's emblazoned on their flag, etched into their walls, standing as a symbol of self-reliance, of grit, a metaphor that whispers, no one is coming to save us, so we will save ourselves. But this idea, this utopia of self-built prosperity, sits on contested soil. The people of Orania call themselves Afrikaners. Their ancestors arrived on African shores in the 1600s, fleeing religious persecution and war-torn Europe. Over generations, their Dutch roots took hold in African soil. A new language, Afrikaans, was born, not in Holland but here. Their identity, forged by dust, drought, and decades of frontier hardship, became something entirely African, and yet never universally accepted as such. To the Afrikaners of Orania, this is home. Not metaphorically, not sentimentally, tangibly and irrevocably, they believe they belong. Yet belonging is not a concept determined solely by heritage or hardship, it is also shaped by history. And South Africa's history, stained by colonialism and apartheid, has left wounds that cannot be soothed by symbolism alone. In Orania, monuments to Afrikaner leaders of the past stand in a quiet semicircle. Busts rescued from demolition across the country. Here they are not celebrated but preserved, positioned so they gaze inward, backs to the future. A curated memory, frozen in time. To the people of Orania, it is not an endorsement of apartheid or conquest. It is a private archive of a complex past. But to others across South Africa, these statues are ghosts. Ghosts of oppression, of division, of pain. Orania's residents say, no nation's history is only good, but no nation's history is only bad. They speak of Shaka Zulu and British imperialists in the same breath, each credited with greatness and shadowed by violence. The question, they argue, is not who committed atrocities. The question is whether we will ever stop the arithmetic of revenge. But can a place so deliberately exclusive ever escape the label of racism? To live in Orania, one must be an Afrikaner who embraces the culture, language, religion, and most importantly, the ethos of doing one's own work. This standard, while not officially racial, has racial outcomes. In a country built on dreams of unity and diversity, Orania's separatism is seen by many as antithetical to that ideal. And yet, Orania thrives. The streets are clean, schools are locally run, hospitals are self-funded, businesses are expanding, children learn in Afrikaans, study local history, and grow up in a community that prizes continuity. There's no skyscraper skyline in the blueprint. Orania's 10-year plan is to build a rural city, no taller than 3 stories, intertwined with agriculture. A city that feels like a farm. Because for them, identity is not found in steel and glass. It is rooted in the land, in soil turned by calloused hands, in meals harvested from their own crops. In a world where globalization often erodes culture, Orania is a countercurrent, preserving what it fears it will lose if diluted language, faith, and tradition. For them, cultural preservation is not racism. It is reverence. They argue that identity is the prerequisite for true diversity, that unity cannot be forced from sameness, but must rise from difference. And yet, the wounds of the past remain fresh for many South Africans. The legacy of apartheid is not ancient history, it is lived reality. Generations denied opportunity, families are broken, economies divided. Orania, to many, is a mirror held up to that painful history, one that seems to refuse reckoning, a town where forgiveness is replaced by function, where apologies are exchanged for action. Orania, to many, is a mirror held up to that painful history, one that seems to refuse reckoning, a town where forgiveness is replaced by function, where apologies are exchanged for action. But perhaps that is Orania's most controversial idea. The belief that solutions can rise from separation. That autonomy can be a path to peace, not a mask for supremacy. What's undeniable is self-sufficiency. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as nations locked down and supply chains collapsed, Orania survived, insulated by its model. With its own produce, its own labor, its own systems, it didn't just endure, it adapted. And that resilience caught the attention of thinkers across the continent. What if African communities embrace the Orania model, not its exclusivity, but its self-reliance? Kwame Nkrumah once envisioned an Africa that was not dependent on the West, an Africa that was built from within. And in that sense, Orania in all its contradictions might echo that same call, not in color but in spirit. The question remains, can a community build its future without rewriting its past? Can isolation be innovation? Can preservation be divorced from exclusion? Orania is not a blueprint for everyone. It is undeniably a product of its time, its trauma, and its tenacity. The question remains, can a community build its future without rewriting its past? Can isolation be innovation? Can preservation be divorced from exclusion? Orania is not a blueprint for everyone. It is undeniably a product of its time, its trauma, and its tenacity. But whether you see it as a testament to independence or a shrine to division, Orania forces the world to ask hard questions about identity, about history, about what it means to truly belong. And perhaps the story of Orania is not about what has been built with bricks, but what is still being built in hearts, a dream, a defiance, a place, and a people who have chosen to stand apart even if the world keeps knocking. What does Orania tell us about South Africa's journey? About humanity's capacity to divide and unite? About the delicate balance between cultural preservation and inclusion? Perhaps the answers lie not in judgment but in questions. Questions we must continue to ask. Questions about reconciliation that goes beyond words. About justice that transcends retribution. About a future where heritage doesn't require walls. Because if we are to move forward, we must be willing to look, to listen, to question, not just others, but ourselves. And so, the question lingers in the air. In a land of so many peoples, so many wounds, so much hope, can a town like Orania exist without betraying the spirit of a united South Africa? Or is it in fact a symptom of the very divisions we've never truly healed? As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across this controversial town, the answer seems as complex as South Africa itself, neither black nor white, but infinite shades between. Across a continent rich in history and struggle, the answers aren't always clear, but the questions are worth asking. Thanks for traveling with us. Wherever you are in the world, remember, home isn't just a place, it's a perspective. We'll see you in the next story, only on Beyond Borders. Hit subscribe, share the story, stay curious.